Hey guys, this is Nick here from Autoworkz. This week we're going to show you how to remove a broken dipstick out of the motor. If you've seen our last video, you know that I have a wonderful father who decided to break it off into my motor. And I have since then tried to get it out and failed numerous times. So I've actually pushed it in through the motor. So, with that being said, we're going to take this valve cover off and show you how we do that. And for all intents and purposes, show you more or less how to change a valve cover gasket as well. So first, we're going to take this, and we're missing the 10mm socket, are we? Nope, this is it. Excellent. So, a few quick things that need to come off here. First, you got to take off this plastic cover, and then this pulls right off. We're going to put our bolts in here, plastic cover up there so we don't lose it. Excuse me for me moving a little slow because I did not let the engine cool down because I'm an asshole. Okay, guess we're going to need a rag. Next thing we're going to do is take off the oil cap if it ever wants to come off. Okay, after 10 minutes of struggling with the oil cap, we got that off. Nonsense. Okay, so we have another cover here that we're going to take off. We got one back here. This is a bolt. Now, important thing to note here, guys. These two here actually hold in ignition coils. So when you take those out, be careful. So these two come right out, which are extremely hot, because again, I don't know how to wait. So now, we'll take this cover out. What I'm going to do is leave these in here, just because it's easier for me. They're a little bit different size than the ones that I pulled out. Obviously, you'll figure that out when you go to put it back, but that's just me being overcautious. So now we have 2 bolts left holding these other coils in. So we're going to take those bolts out. What else? So now what we're going to do is begin to pull the coils out. So you're going to start to pull it out, disconnect it from the harness. Not that it matters in the slightest bit which coil you put back in which space. I'm a little bit overcautious, so when I put them down, I'm going to put them down in an order so I know which cylinder they came out of. Again, just because that's me being a little bit overcautious with things. So, now in most of your cars, you're going to have a bracket that holds the line here. This is a power steering line, which I guess the guy who had this car before me broke, or somebody who worked on it broke. So there's no actual bracket holding this here. But there's a bolt there, so that's interesting. So basically the bolt would go right here. You're going to take that bolt out, zip it out. I'll zip it out just to show you. So that's where that bolt would go. Then the bracket, oh, and we lost the bolt. Okay, so I got the bolt that I dropped in the back. Now we have, see, this is where the air ratchet's going to come in handy, because we're not going to be able to fit that in there. So Okay, so we have 2 bolts holding on these brackets here that need to come off. So, if we can get this to sit on there, we will continue. Why is that not going on there? There's a question. Of course. Okay, here we go. Loosen that one. Before we get this other one out, we're going to take that hose off, which needs to come off anyways. So, this is where the pliers come in handy. Pull that off. Sometimes this hose is molded on there because it's never been taken off. That one came off nice and easy this time. So we don't have to worry about that. So, now, should be able to get at this one. Okay, those 2 bolts come off. Now, not that you have to do this every time and disconnect everything and put everything back later and blah, blah, blah. I do, just because I'm used to losing things over the years of doing all this stuff. So, I always take a step further and make sure. So, with that being said, we now have every single thing that is attached to this valve cover disconnected. So as you can see, it's not too much of a job. So the last thing we got to do is take off the bolts holding the actual valve cover in. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's 2 in the back. Again, that's really, really hot because the genius I am doesn't let anything cool down. Okay, 1 and 2. So, now, before you go ahead and pull the valve cover off, important thing to note is when pulling this off, these washers do come loose. Some of them are loose now, some of them are not. But the best thing to do is just pull them off now. See, like this one doesn't want to come off. That one doesn't want to come off. So when you start to pull up on the valve cover, they will ultimately come off. So we're going to start with the mallet, see if it comes loose. The washer comes loose. And it's already come loose. So, just because it's a little hot, I'm going to try to break it with the crowbar. Now, make sure when you're doing this, if you're ever going into here for the purpose of not changing the valve cover, be very careful, as I'm going into here with the purpose of not changing it, because obviously you're pulling up on this and the valve cover gasket is right underneath it. So, if you're pulling this up, you don't want to screw up the gasket, obviously. So, this is already up and out. And now we're going to get a few rags to pull that off with. 1, because I don't want to get my hands filthy, and 2, because it's hot. Like my nightgown? Fool. That's the guy who broke the dipstick there.
Dipshit, right?
Yeah. I'm sure you could. All right. So after a few minutes of fighting with this stupid valve cover, we got it off. So now the gasket is here. So if you were going to be replacing that, it would be getting pulled out of here. And obviously the gasket comes with the tube seals here. So you'd be taking a little flathead or whatever your fancy is to pull those out. And then just pressing those back in. Usually the easiest way to do that is to just take a socket that size and just tap them in. And then obviously the gasket, same thing, just pull it out, put the new one in. Silicone a little bit if you're into that sort of thing. But again, this is not a valve cover tutorial, even though I figured we will go into that real quick. So we have the valve cover off. Here's the broken dipstick. So we're going to go ahead and pull that out and throw that away. Not that you need to clean this, obviously, but I'm going to anyways, just because I'm weird to throw it away. I don't know why. Alright, so now we're going to put the valve cover back on, which it's a little less... Ah, man, this is what I didn't want to happen, and it happened anyways. That's what happens when you don't work with gloves.
Too poor for those, right?
Too poor or too lazy, one of the two. So, I'm going to go ahead and play with this for a moment until we get this to go back on. Which seems like it never will. Alright, so we got the valve cover seated after a few minutes. Kind of a pain in the neck sometimes because there's a lot of shit in the way and you got to play with everything. Now I'm going to go put away the things that I'm not going to need anymore. Again, not that you have to necessarily do this beforehand, but again, this is just what I like to do just because makes things easier and more flowing for me. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is get these washers back on there. 1, 2, oh, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So, now that we got those back on there, now we're going to go ahead and put these nuts back on.
What'd you say, Nick?
These nuts. Go ahead and snug them with the hands first. These, it's important to note that sometimes, because that rubber piece actually goes inside the valve cover, so sometimes you have to press it down a little bit to get the nut to catch the thread, if you will. So that's 3. Here's 4. And 5. And 6. Okay, that's on. Now we're just going to go ahead and zap those nice and tight with the gun. Okay, so they're so I got everything tight. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and put the oil cap back on there. And how you choose to reassemble this whole thing is ultimately your decision. So this is gonna sit back up here like so. We're gonna go ahead and actually, before we do that, get these back in for this bracket here. If that ever wants to go. No. Now, I'm going to do this by hand. Just make that nice and snug, not over tightened. Nice and snug. Okay. Now, we'll sit that nice like that, and drop these coils back in here. One. Number 2. 3. And 4. Okay. Oops. Okay. Now, because I forgot which one holds which, we're just gonna line this up. So that's gonna hold, okay, those. Oh, fuck, I forgot again, right? You son of a bitch. Okay, so it's this one that gets a bolt, which you're gonna have to line up. And this one. Obviously, you want to hit those before you put the other cover back on. Snug, not over tightened. Again. Now we have also these up here, which are going to be covered by that. Just gotta play with this a little bit to get everything to line up right. It could be a pain in the neck sometimes. Because obviously Honda's design on this wasn't necessarily the best. Okay, let's get those in there. hose back on. That just slides back on. Put the clamp back. Never wants to go back. Come on. There you go. Now, you had that little bolt back here, which I'm not even going to bother to put back on, because it's not necessary. And then you have 1, 2, and we're just going to zip those down with this. Go ahead and put this super awesome VTech plastic cover. This actually adds 27 extra horsepower to your car. So be sure to put that back on there, because that's very important. This cover right here. It's definitely a necessity. Zip those back with the gun. And we're all back together. So now, if you're doing a valve cover gasket, you're going to put this dipstick back in there, obviously, and you'd be done. But for us, we're going to put this back inside. Hopefully it doesn't break again on the way out. And we can now check our oil, which seems to be very good. So we're going to go put this back in. And again, for those of you who have not a broken bracket back here, the bolt goes right here. It's going to hold around this hose, just holds it out of the way, kind of. Not that this is really going anywhere anyways. Probably should have a bracket there, but since it's not there, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, in my opinion, even though it is broken. But there you have it. Valve cover or broken dipstick or whatever you want to call it. 2003 Honda Accord.